Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the InfoSec Beat podcast. I'm your host, Kris Burkhardt. We're broadcasting from the Nick Price Memorial Underground Subterranean Faraday Cage in a top secret location. My guest today is Urszula Fabiszak, and Urszula and I are going to talk about information security careers. Urszula, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kris. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our chat.
I am too. Urszula, I think you have had a fascinating career in information security, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your time here at Accenture? You've certainly done a lot.
Yeah, it's been 20 years, Kris. It's a long and great career, at least in my opinion. Like many other people, I started on the consulting side of the business. At the time, I started in a group that was called Communications and High Tech Practice, and I did that for 10 years. I was the proverbial road warrior, and I learned a ton during that time about the telecom industry and technology and how to help our clients navigate through the organizational transformations that they were going through and how to adapt to the vast amount of change that they were driving. So after 10 years of working in consulting, I decided to get off the road. And I found a great role in our internal IT organization. I was put in charge of managing a complex organizational change as Accenture was consolidating hundreds of systems and applications onto SAP. So you can imagine the fun in that. But it truly was a massive change effort. And I learned a ton during the time about how Accenture operates internally and how we run our own business, as opposed to our clients' businesses that I worked on previously. So as we often say at Accenture, change is the one constant here. So not surprisingly, I was also asked to lead a group of change professionals like me who would then lead transformational efforts within Accenture. And that group grew to over 50 people in a very short period of time. And a couple of years later, when an opportunity came up to lead a behavior change program under our new CISO, I was super excited about that. And that's how my career in information security started.
Oh, that's great, Urszula. I mean, that's a really, you summarized, I think, a pretty incredible 20 years there in what felt like about a minute and a half. Let's talk a little bit, if we could, about what what change really is in the professional sense, right? The change management leadership role that you play, and maybe you tell us a little bit about, for the layman, right? Why is change management so important in technology and information security?
Yep. So I tell you an anecdote from very, very, very early days of my working in information security. And the moment that I knew I wanted to do organizational change management for our CISO. Andy, who was our new CISO, talked to me and he said, I have this vision for how I want to shape our company's security culture. And I want the culture to resemble that of a chemical company's security first mindset, right? So imagine a chemical plant where people show up to work and the moment they walk into the plant, right? Security is the first thing on their mind, and it never leaves their mind till they kind of go to their locker and leave the company. So the challenge for me as a professional change manager was that Accenture is not a chemical company, right? We're a consulting company, and our people, are known for having bold ideas and being independent risk takers. And we're also very big and we are very complex, and we have a very diverse and very young workforce. So it's thinking about change in that context was a huge challenge for me, right? Another thing I didn't mention is that our people work in, at client sites, and they work in delivery centers and corporate offices and home offices, right? They oftentimes have that client first mentality, right? They are immersed in our clients' cultures first. In fact, I remember our previous CEO used to say that we have a culture of cultures. So having that, driving that culture change within our organization, where people think about security first, both at work and at home, was what I was charged in doing. And as a for a change professional, having that seat at the leadership table from day one was very empowering, right? So we built a great organization from the ground up with the right balance of technology and business processes and people or behaviors. The change that had happened was that our people stopped thinking about information security as the compliance thing, and they started thinking about it as the right thing to do, right? So it became more of a kind of muscle reflex than an instinct. And I think that it was a rewarding journey for me as well as a professional and a rewarding journey for us as a leadership team, right? Creating that brand, creating a successful culture change program, and watching the team win all kinds of awards for the work that we have done and the results that we have achieved, right? Being invited to conversations with our clients to talk about the journey, kind of day one to where we are today. We are pretty mature program today. Has been a lot of fun, a lot of hard work, but the change is very visible, right? When we look back at a few years back and today in what our people think, say, and about security and what they do every day. So that's what change meant for us in the information security context, and how we changed those hearts and minds of pretty much everybody in the company, from the top leadership down to every employee.
Yeah, I think Urszula, it's a really great story. Moving Accenture, right, which is a big ship, and changing course to build security into the mindset. So along that journey, kind of back to your career, were there any pivotal moments or perhaps a memorable experience that made you realize you had an affinity for information security?
Great question. And I think that, there were a few moments like that. From day one, I was very excited for the opportunity to be part of something new, right? We had this, blank slate to create something new and something that would have our fingerprints on it, right? It felt very entrepreneurial to me. And I think that there was a lot of kind of raw creativity and innovation and enthusiasm across the whole team, right, back then. We've come a long way since then, but I think that entrepreneurial spirit is still here today, right? We continue to disrupt and reinvent, right, ourselves as an organization and as a team, as the risk landscape continues to evolve. So for me, it was a learning journey, right? As both an information security professional, because I had to learn a lot of stuff that I didn't know about incident management, right? About technology and operations, about security standards and certifications. All of that was new to me, but I knew that, we had to change. It was part of the full picture, right? The technology, the process, and the change. So I don't think that there was any one moment. I think it was a learning experience from the very beginning to today that kind of makes me wake up and be happy to go to work, because I'm constantly learning new things.
No, that's great. So Urszula, you're very much seen, not only by your title as a managing director within Accenture, but by your your poise, your attitude, and your accomplishments. You're very much seen as a leader at Accenture, and I would even say in the change portion of the cybersecurity industry. You, as you mentioned, your team has accomplished a lot. But let me ask you a little bit about leaders and your style. Maybe a two-part question. So, what leaders have inspired you during your career at Accenture, and how do they do that? And then I'm also interested to know, what do you think makes for a successful leader in information security, and as well, of course, as your change management discipline?
Yep. So I'll talk about two people, two leaders that have inspired me during my career at Accenture. In general, when I think about inspiring people, I get inspired by people who are trailblazers, people who have the chutzpah to disrupt the status quo, people who are visionaries and have one foot into the futures. They are kind of guiding us through today's challenges. And the best leaders, in my opinion, are people who have the ability to motivate and challenge people and to get them to raise their game instead of criticizing them. But that also requires a certain dose of humility and of self-awareness that allows leaders to connect with people at any level, right? And relate to their experiences and encouraging them to achieve great things. So there was a leader at Accenture, it was one of our CEOs, Bill Green, who used to refer to himself as I hope I got the quote right, proud plumber's son from Western Massachusetts, I think. And, his character, his work ethic, his leadership style were legendary at Accenture. And he inspired me, and I think he inspired a whole generation of leaders with his humility and approach to how he did work. So that's one leader. And I think the other one is Andy, our CISO. And I tell you why. So every year at the beginning of the fiscal year, Andy would ask me, so Urszula, what are you going to be famous for at the end of this year? And that put a different kind of pressure on me and on my team every single year, because we basically had to think, how do we reach for the stars one more time, right? When we thought we've done it all, right? So how do we squeeze more juice from that orange, right? How do we find ways to raise that bar and deliver more outstanding results and innovative things? So that question and that inspiration and that nudging that happened all the time, I think help us to get to the point where we are and being as successful as we have been. So these are the two leaders. And then you also asked what I think makes a successful leader, and in information security specifically. So number one, I think, is don't change yourself to try to fit in. I think that you need to bring your unique self to the table, play up your strengths. For me, it was bringing my expertise and experience as a change leader to help influence the behaviors and kind of approaches how to strengthen security culture to this crazy complex company. Right. And I think that I always felt, as I said, from day one as being part of the leadership team, not because I was same, but because I brought different, unique things to the table. So, stay true to yourself. And then the other one is, I think that the power of networking. I think I constantly network to learn more about other parts of security. I mentioned the incident response or technology or certifications and standards. My primary focus is on organizational change and behavior change, but understanding how those things fit together, and they change constantly, right, is what really makes me and my team and my program successful. I could not be successful with other people's support and knowledge and expertise. So it's those two things, right? Be true to yourself and then network to learn to get better and to grow all the time.
I think those are great qualities to have, Urszula, and I am glad you are your unique self, your authentic self every day. So we're just about at the end of our time here. Could I ask, Urszula, do you have, perhaps one lesson learned or a word of wisdom for other leaders or would-be leaders out there in the InfoSec space?
I think so. Yes, and I tell you how I'm going to say it. So I oftentimes when I talk to our junior team members, I always think about, if I could go back in time and I could give my younger self some piece of advice, what would that be? And it's a couple of things. So number one is take bolder risks so you can learn more and learn faster. Don't be afraid to fail. Number two kind of links to what I said about what makes me successful, and that is build and nourish those mentoring relationships. Ask for advice more often so you can get smarter faster. And then the final thing is never stop learning, never stop challenging yourself, no matter where you are in your career, whether it's information security or other parts, of the business. That's, I think, the key thing to that makes you successful. So I hope that that resonates with people, and whether they are at the very beginning of their career or they're more mature in their career. But these are the three pieces of advice that I share with people who join my team in security.
I think those are great pieces of advice. Well, Urszula, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today. I think it's been a great lens for our listeners on one person's leadership journey in InfoSec. We will on the podcast. We'll be covering a few other people in the future. So Urszula, thank you for going first, and I look forward to following your career as it will certainly continue to rise. Thank you, dear listeners, and we'll speak again soon. Urszula, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kris. It was my pleasure, and I hope that the listeners will find this story interesting. Thanks again.